Well, let's see here. I might not be Morgan Freeman, but this is... Classic Gamer Reviews.
Reita the Black Manta for the Nintendo Entertainment System has all the makings of a great game. You play as a ninja, you have a lot of cool moves, and the name of the game itself just sounds cool in and of itself. So with all this, you would think that Reita the Black Manta would be an outstanding game. No. While the game isn't terrible, it certainly isn't good. For the most part, I could care less if a Nintendo game had a plot or anything, as many games just had bare-bones stories and often required you to read the manuals to understand what and why you were doing something. Because of this, a lot of Nintendo games weren't really plot-heavy. If I want an epic story, then Nintendo is not really where I'm gonna go. While I think we can all agree that there are a few exceptions to this, I think we can also agree that Nintendo games really aren't gonna win Story of the Year awards. For the most part, that is. But then there's Reita the Black Manta for the Nintendo, which tries to have a plot. Normally, I wouldn't nitpick something like this, but when a game tries to make itself serious or have a plot, especially on a system that isn't really well known for epic stories, it only makes the mistakes and problems much more prominent if said plot isn't that good or is riddled with problems. You see, there's a lot of dialogue in this game, an impressive amount actually for a platformer, and it does a lot to try and build a story, but starting the game off, some annoying problems appear right away. Here's one, the fucking name. You know something is really wrong with the game when the first problem originates with the name itself. The game is called Reita the Black Manta, which is a sick name, like I said. And that'd be all fine and dandy and everything, except you're fucking purple. Does this look black to you? No, it's purple. I can see why they didn't make the character black, as it would have made it impossible for you to actually see where you were. And in their defense, calling the game Reita the Purple Manta wouldn't have been as cool. But then, why not just call the game Reita the Manta? So while the first problem with the game is the name itself, the second problem is with the name of the characters. We already went over Black Manta's purple, but then there's this. The whole point of this game is to save some children who have been kidnapped, the most important one being a boy named Taro. My main problem with this is that the main bad guy's name is El Toro. And since El in this case means the word the and can be excluded from his name, all they really did was replace one letter. I mean, who the fuck was in charge for coming up with names for this game? A goat? Naming aside, the whole plot of kids being kidnapped and you having to rescue them starts out actually pretty well. But over time, that plot quickly becomes boring and just plain stupid. This is a video game for the NES, remember? So plot isn't what most people came for, they came for the gameplay itself. And to be honest, gameplay-wise, this game actually starts out, like the plot, pretty well. You're given a good variety of attacks that, for the most part, all do different things. To do a special attack, you hold down the power button and hit the D-pad in a certain direction. But the thing is, there's no limit or cost to how much you can use a special attack. And I don't even know what the power bar means, as each attack was just as effective whether I used little or full energy. And this makes an already easy game much easier, especially when you learn the later attacks. The game even says to use the invisibility skill during a boss fight, and the invisibility skill makes you invincible, so the game is basically pointing out its own weak design flaws. Granted, I would imagine it would be hard to design a game and its levels to incorporate this game's vast amount of special moves and attacks, especially since you can change them mid-level, but it leads to the question, why add those if you can't utilize them in your game correctly in a way that isn't cheap? It's a shame that the levels weren't more tailored to the use of special attacks though, because they are really fun to use. Why they didn't build levels like this is beyond me, because basically they reuse the same environments over and over and over, and they very rarely change it up. But I'll get into that later. You're fucking welcome! As you progress through the levels, you'll find notes that Taro left behind, and he seems to know a lot about this whole situation, leading me to yet again nitpick at the game as a whole. How the hell does he know that he's gonna be taken to the waterfront? Also, none of the guards noticed that he was fucking leaving notes everywhere? This stuff in particular doesn't really bother me as much, because I think it's better than leaving a player completely left in the dark. Sometimes realism has to be sacrificed for a better gameplay experience. Early on, you're told by none other than Taro that you can interrogate men if they're wearing red shirts. This acts in a way to further explain the story, which I think is neat, seeing how in my playthrough of the game, none of the dialogue was fully copied from one enemy to the other. Yet again though, the game tries to do too much, and because of that, some of the conversations are really stupid. Alright, I'll talk! Tell me everything that you know. I don't know anything, I swear! What's the name of this organization? I don't know, I just do what I'm told. You don't know the name of the company you work for. I'm sorry, but how does that happen? Hello? Why, hello there, good sir. Would you like a job? Depends. What's the name of the company? Don't worry about that, my boy. You don't need to worry yourself with such petty things as, what's the name of the company? You'd have the benefit of no job description, and you'd get paid in checks that may or may not be cleared by the banks. So what do you say? Okay. Remember how I said the plot started out well? Well, it did. And while there were some dumb conversations like the two you just saw, none of these really crippled the game. But then there was this one. After finding out that the kids are being forced to sell drugs, which I thought made the plot more intense, the game takes a complete 180 and the following conversation with one of the guards happens. You guys are scum. You don't know what you're messing with. Drugs kill you. You think you're cool, but you're not. You're just plain dumb. Isn't America great? And well, I guess Germany too, because this guy named Reita made me a shout-out video to promote my channel, so thanks, Germany! Now back to the review. After this conversation, I pretty much gave up on interrogating any more enemies, and I just wanted to finish the game and get it over with, because I felt like I was playing an anti-drug campaign. The game adds a few new gameplay elements like flying and a behind-the-shoulder shuriken throwing part, and these parts are kind of fun to say the least. Getting past the game's 5 levels to get to the final boss can be as simple as just using invisibility and getting there in 10 minutes, or playing the game the way it's meant to be played and you get there in 50 minutes. Either way, it's easy as hell, since enemies always spawn in the same places on the interior parts of the game, of which there are only 3. And after killing them, you get a health power-up, making the legit health kits useless as fuck. Rooms can be cleared the same way every time to give you more and more health than you'll ever lose fighting the bad guys. It also doesn't help that most of the enemies can't duck and shoot, so they won't ever really hit you. My personal biggest complaint is the animation for your character. All he does is walk, 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 walk. Aren't ninjas supposed to be fast? I mean, this guy can jump high and do all these moves, but all he does is walk. It makes the game feel slow and dull. You eventually walk your way to a dull and cryptic last boss fight that requires you to use 4 different attacks on El Toro and not hit Taro. This part is difficult because if you fuck up and hit Taro, then you lose health. And half the time that you hit El Toro, your attacks don't register as damage. There's no rhyme or reason to this either. It can't be explained why this happens. Sometimes to start off the 4-attack combo thing, the first attack won't register until you do it like 5 times. There's also talk of a secret weapon that El Toro has, but such a thing is never used, and when you face him at the end, he's disguised as a jukebox. So it's either assumed that this jukebox is a secret weapon, or he has brain damage. Yep. I think that's how I want to end the review. A man in a jukebox. Wrath of the Black Manta for the Nintendo Entertainment System certainly is an ambitious game, and while some fun can be had from this game, at most parts, it just falls flat, weird, and dumb. Thanks to Andrew Anderson 96 for letting us borrow this game.
I may not be Morgan Freeman, but this is Classic Gamer Reviews.
The game is basically pointing out in its own weak design. That's not even a fucking word! Does anyone even listen to the post-credit